Okay, I do apologize about um, the interview with Tracy Hogan, the Executive Director of Federal Programs. Had the camera set up in the tripod. It was only 5 minutes long. It was actually a 45-minute interview. So actually what I did was I wrote down all of the questions and answers um, that I did with the interview with Ms. Hogan. And if this isn't sufficient enough, Dr. Green, I'll definitely try to interview her or someone else in the future. But I guess my technology faded on me as well. I know either the memory card went out or I don't know what happened. But what we talked about is, we talked about her educational journey. She got into that. And then a typical day regarding her position being the executive director of federal programs. She's always on the phone, always emails facilities. She actually had to go to Coastal Carolina that day and talk about the Read to Succeed legislation. She also has, I think, 4-hour meetings every Wednesday with Ms. Ambrose. So that was kind of interesting, how much they meet and how often they meet. But it's basically every day is different because sometimes there's emergency IEP she has to attend that is not on her schedule. And like I said, she's always constantly on the phone. She learned a lot about facilities this year, more than she's ever thought she would ever have to use the facilities, like trying to find the right toilet seat for a special education student in a classroom, or trying to find where the best spot to put a de-escalation room in a school. She's heavily involved in those decisions as well. I also asked her about the State Department and dealing with other agencies. She does deal with a lot of the State Department, and she has built relationships with people at the State Department. And she talked about Title I funds and IDEA and how those funds are allocated. And she basically said, Title I is pretty much black and white, that you just have to go with what they ask for. If you need to allocate money towards this, you have to do it. And IDA is not really black and white. There's more wiggle room to how you want your funds allocated. So she clarified those two types of federal programs and her teams on those programs, and how they helped assist her in making sure that those Title I plans, those Title I school plans, are approved by the state and federal government. Next question I asked her was her role with the superintendent and other district office personnel. And they're very close. She said Dr. Ellsbury is a texter, and they stay in contact on a daily basis, especially with some high-profile cases dealing with some of our special education students. They work very closely, especially on the budget and weekly involvement, especially dealing with Title I. And the next question I asked her was previous positions you've held, and what position did you enjoy the most? And she's been a specialist. She's been a contracted person before. Our district does contract other agencies, and she was part of that agency at one time. And I think she says she really enjoys this job the most. She really enjoys being an executive director for the program. She feels like she gets the most satisfaction and gratification doing this position, her current position. So next question I asked her, what is her short and long-term goals that she has set for herself or the people she supervises? And she said competition is really tough, trying to get her team around her. So there's a lot of competition for the people in her department, and she just wants everyone to work together as a team. That was one of her goals, is to make sure that when she was coming from her previous positions, that she said that it's a lot easier to get kids what you want to do, but it's a lot more difficult when you're trying to get adults on the same page and trying to ensure that they're all working collaboratively together to do what's best for kids. So she thinks that's a challenge each and every day, but that's one of her goals, is to make sure her whole department and team work collaboratively together to make sure that we're doing what is best for students. The next question I asked her was anything that people really don't know what the position of executive director for the programs really is. Can you like justify your position? Like if, say a staff member or doesn't know what to do, what would you say your role is? And she basically said to supervise on how much, she touches with every agency. She's always involved with all of the aspects of the school, not just special education, but like I said, FAPE and Title I and IDEA. And she's always has her hands in something, and she's always involved with all those agencies, especially working with the chiefs and the executive directors, ensuring that all those programs are being implemented accordingly. And the last question I asked her was advice that you can offer for a class who wants to work at the district level office someday, and just make sure that you know what you're getting into. Make sure you do your research before going that next step to the district office, and what the job entails. And I kind of asked her off a sidebar question, because she came from a smaller district than Ori, and I kind of was like, okay, well, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a smaller district or a larger district? And she preferred the larger district. In the smaller district, she had to wear many hats and had to do many jobs. And in a larger district, she kind of oversees all those positions. She doesn't have to wear as many hats, but she does wear a big hat and being the executive director of federal programs. But she would rather be in the bigger district than the smaller. But she does miss the communication and the relationship piece of being in the smaller district. Knowing teachers by first name and knowing the ins and outs of every school. So she does miss that part of being a smaller district, but she does prefer being in a larger district. So I asked her about 9 questions. I wrote down the questions and wrote down her answers, just in case something like this happened. But like I said, I do apologize. It was a great interview. It was like a 45-minute interview, but for whatever reason, the interview got cut off after 5 minutes. I thanked her, and I thank you for watching this interview with Tracy Hogan and myself. To reiterate the interview that I had with her, but it was very very knowledgeable, and she, like I said, I worked with her hand in hand on a few of our highly qualified, or highly, what's the word I'm looking for, the IEP meetings that are very high maintenance, that really need some support, and Ms. Hogan has always given that support to myself and St. James Middle School. She's been great. Thank you, and I'll see you in class next week.